Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio's, I'm gonna say way back when history show, because we are going to be talking about Thomas Paine, a revolutionary hero of America. He was born in England. He was a political activist, a philosopher, a political theorist, and very tied to the revolution over here. But, since he was born in England, that means we get to have Glynn back on the show. He's on Big Blend Radio every fourth Saturday, and he owns Norfolk Tours. So if you're planning to go to England, anywhere in England for any reason, you need to contact Glynn. Just
That's
go to
right.
norfolk-tours.co.uk. So welcome back, Glynn. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Good to see
you too. And everyone, Glynn's article about Thomas Paine and his connection in England, or his ancestry in England, is up on Blend Radio and TV.com. But Glynn, I want to start with this. Why does he have two Paines? It's Paine with an E on the end and Paine without the E. What's going on? Why does he sometimes have an E and sometimes not?
Depends who wrote it down. See, that the thing is, in those days, you didn't really have that much system for names. So whoever wrote your name down, wrote it down however they wanted to write it down. So it could easily have been P-A-Y-N-E, because a lot of people use a Y instead of an I. So it could have been P-A-Y-N-E, P-A-I-N, P-A-I-N-E, loads of spellings.
Wow. So when you're researching someone like Thomas Paine, do you put all those versions in there?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at an index, you need to look at all of those different spellings, and you also need to think about the person who wrote it down. So say, for instance, you were getting married, and you were getting married in a strange place where they didn't know you, and they said to you, what's your name? And he said, my name is Thomas Paine. And the vicar was very old. He was a little bit deaf. And who knows what he'd write down? He would write down what he heard,
and that was that.
It could have been P-A-Y-N, Paine.
Yeah,
it could have been P-A-N-E. That's all of these words. Even saying pain, even the words, there is P-A-I-N when you hit somebody. There's P-A-N-E, which is a window pane. There are all different words in the language that are spelt differently that sound the same. So if someone said to him, my name is Thomas Paine, he spelt what he heard. So it could be spelt anyway.
That's why people say English is one of the most difficult languages.
So they say. Yeah, luckily, I learned it when I was very tiny, so I didn't have to worry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a ridiculous language when you look at it. Some of the words,
who started it?
O-U-G-H. We say rough, R-O-U-G-H, but we say cough, C-O-U-G-H. Why do we pronounce them two different?
Through and through. It's interesting. And I do want to tell people that your next segment with us here on Big Blend Radio in April, this fourth Saturday in April, stay tuned for that, because we're going to do the difference between England's English and America's English. So we're going to be talking about some of the fun words, and some of them get a little naughty.
Really?
That will definitely be a laugh. I can tell you.
It definitely will be. And so we're also going to look at some of the history behind that, when you were talking about with soldiers going over during World War II. So it's going to be fun. So stay tuned for that. So Paine could have been spelled in different ways. So he was born in Thetford, right? And that's Norfolk.
Yeah, Thetford's in Norfolk. You got your picture behind you of the statue of Thomas Paine, which is in Thetford. Now Thetford's got its own very interesting history. Thetford is a very large town, and it was a very important town because it had its own castle. It's got a priory there. It's got some fantastic medieval architecture.
Cool.
And it was a very, very important town because it was on the main road from Norwich to London. So it was a very important place. It was on a river crossing. Actually, in Thetford itself, it's got one of the oldest pieces of road in the country, because there's a piece of road there that is Bronze Age. They
Wow.
they say that this roadway was there way before the Romans came, and there is a
Wow.
river crossing, and that
Hmm.
is where this little road crosses the river, and
Oh, wow.
that is a really, really ancient roadway. And
Wow.
Thetford is on the boundary between Norfolk and Suffolk. So you can see the position of it on a river, on a main road, on the boundary between two counties. You've got a major area of importance. And also Thetford is really important during the Stone Age because it's got one of the biggest flint mines in the area. And so that was in the Stone Age, and actually flints from that area have been found on the continent because that was such good quality flint that it was actually traded right the way across the continent from Thetford. So it's
Wow.
amazing. The history.
See, so you traded it across here, and the Indians made arrows out of it.
Yeah. I think you had your own flint.
Flint. We do get flint.
I'm talking the continent in Europe, not the continent. No.
Well, we are going to do our U.S. and American, USA and UK connection here with Thomas Paine. But going back to Flint, I know on shows before you've talked about Flint being part of some of the castles and ruins. Some of the
Yeah.
So it's part of the building material.
Well, if you look at the building behind the statue I'm pointing to, it's UPSC. The building to the left behind Thomas Paine has got red brick windows and then black and white stones. Well, those black and white stones are all flint. That is all flint. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
And
Because you don't find that here. You just don't find flint other than arrowheads
Arrowheads.
and things you would use. So not in buildings.
There must be flint in the ground if they used it for arrowheads. So there must be. But there's a lot of flint. I mean, that whole black wall that is just behind the statue is all the black there is all flint as well. That is all flint.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So Thetford, when we think about the American Revolution and the war, and hey, we don't want to be part of England anymore, and Thomas Paine was very much part of that.
Yeah.
For historians and people doing family history research, and had those who fought in the Revolution, and I mean, obviously, there's a lot of connections in family history over here, especially on the East Coast of the states. That's definitely the main part of it, the Northeast. So I bet a lot of people come over to England and to places like Thetford. I mean, you may be related to Thomas Paine. Who knows? Who knows what he did when he was over here? But, and he went all over. But if you want to trace your ancestry back, so Thetford would be a good place to go to connect.
I mean, Thetford is a lovely place to go anyway, because it's got so much history. So, if you're interested in the Stone Age, if you're interested in the Normans, if you're interested in the later history, you've got everything in that area as well. And also Thetford is nicely placed for the coast, because that's not far. I mean, nowhere in England is very far from the coast anyway. But Thetford is very handy for Suffolk and also Norfolk as well. So Thetford is a good place to base yourself, really. I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily the middle of Thetford, because it's a town, but on the outskirts in some of the villages there are some really lovely little pubs and B&Bs that you can base yourself around Thetford. It's a lovely area, and there's a magnificent forest around Thetford, because in the 1920s, between the wars, they decided that they would plant a massive forest in this part of Norfolk. Because the ground there is very sandy, so that's not very good for farming. So they planted pine trees, and there are thousands, I would imagine, of acres of trees. And Thetford is a very
nice,
important area for wildlife. There's lots and lots of birds and animals, deer, obviously. So it's a lovely place. It's got something for everybody. really
Oh, it
has.
sounds like a good destination for
Yeah.
people. I know everyone's starting to travel again. It's so exciting.
Oh yeah,
You
come on, come on.
I
Yeah.
know. Everybody, let's
Yeah.
get out and about.
Yeah.
So let's go to Thomas Paine. He was born in Thetford,
Yeah.
but it seemed that he was not really. He was like ahead of his time in a way. Like he did not seem that he was more of a brainy, smart person, and
Yeah.
didn't do good in a normal work atmosphere or in a regular job. It didn't seem like he
No.
wanted to. He was a rebel.
He definitely was a rebel, and I think he had a cause rather than being a rebel without a cause. I think he had a cause, or several
Yeah.
of them. Yeah, he went to grammar school again, which is a very unusual thing for someone to do in that era. And he worked in quite a lot of different types of jobs. But his sort of main trade at the time was he worked for the excise men, which are the tax man. And he was also trying to catch smugglers and people who were trying to evade tax paying. And again, he fell out with his bosses because he could see there was a lot of corruption going on. So he didn't like the corruption and he didn't want to have any part of it. So he then wrote letters and tried to solve the problem by reporting people. And that was not the day when you had whistleblowers. You have
Yeah.
whistleblowers now, and they are supported. If you had a whistleblower then, you were more likely to get the sack. So he changed his job quite a few times, and he moved around quite a lot as well. But I
And
think
he got
think he
married
had-
twice too. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he lost his first wife in childbirth, so that weren't his fault.
Yeah.
But I think he had lots of good points, but he also had a few bad points as well, I think. But when you look at what his life was like and what he was trying to do for a lot of his life, he was rubbing people up the wrong way. But I think he had a lot of right intentions. Just the way he did it, probably.
I think he'd championed the working man.
Yes.
And then maybe if he's working for the excise department of people and seeing them maybe sneak a few little dollars here and there for themselves or something like that.
Pounds.
Yeah, pounds. Okay.
I'm getting ready for our next
shillings. Then and he's going to speak out. So obviously, from the government point of view, he would be a pain.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe that's how he got his last name.
Maybe that's where he got his name.
No,
Maybe
no.
you never know. They said you're a pain. That's it. But yet, I think he also did a lot for women, which was unheard of back then because women really had no voice.
Yeah, I mean, the most amazing thing that I discovered about him was that when he obviously didn't get on with his second wife, they had an annulment, or what I suppose we would think of now as a divorce, and he actually made sure that she got her inheritance from her father. Now, in them days, that didn't happen. If your wife had an inheritance, it would normally go to the husband unless it was specified, and that had to be written in the will that it would only go to the wife. But that was really unusual. So generally speaking, if you were married, a man and woman were married, and the woman inherited something, it would normally come into the marriage. But when Thomas Paine and his wife split up, he made sure that she had everything, which is just unheard of.
Especially back then. I mean, isn't divorce kind of rare?
Oh yeah, I mean, I haven't got any in my family. Probably before the 1960s.
Yeah, the 60s started with, okay, you're out.
Yeah,
that's it.
But I mean, it's and saying that actually yesterday was my 39th wedding anniversary.
Yes, that's so awesome.
Yeah,
congratulations.
We got married in the church behind me. That's why I've got.
That's so cool.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, in them days, divorce was something,
That's rare.
Yeah. And then for him to make sure she gets her inheritance, and they're splitting because they didn't get along together. that's another thing too, because, now in divorces, I mean, we have specialized attorneys just because people want to just know they're
Take
fighting
everything.
over what they have. And
Mhm.
I'm taking this. No, well, I'm taking that. You know what I mean? So I think that
Mm.
that's another thing, because when
Yeah.
is it that someone's nice to someone they're divorcing? It's
Yeah,
only,
well, I mean,
know.
the thing that the document that they actually wrote out, which was a big document, in lots of lines. It said at the beginning, it said there were lots of unhappy quarrels. So they fell out. They weren't getting on very well,
Mm.
and actually all he ended up with was £45. Now, £45 was a lot of money in them days, but when you consider that the wife ended up with the house and the business and the shop and everything else. So,
Wow.
So I mean, he made sure that she had enough to live on. In theory, in them days, he could have just left her and gone.
Yeah.
Mm.
So then
Left her with nothing.
he came to America after his second wife, after the
Yes.
split. And
Yes.
it was really, I think he got really connected in with the leaders of the revolution
Yeah.
through
Well,
Benjamin Franklin, right?
Yeah, I was going to say he had met Benjamin Franklin in London somehow, and who knows how. But he had met Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin Franklin actually gave him letters of introduction to people in America, in Philadelphia. So when he came to America, he already had a load of people who he needed to ask for, and he then got into the crowd of people who were into journalism, I suppose. And that must have been quite the early days of journalism. I mean, there would have been handbills that would have been put out and about, and small newspapers, but journalism as a profession, really, in England, it didn't really exist very much at all.
Benjamin Franklin was one of the ones who started it, really, even with the almanac. And he was a newspaper person and an amazing writer. So I can see the connection there. And then you also think about a lot of journalism started even during as abolitionists to get the word out about slavery and to stop slavery.
But also, Benjamin Franklin spent time in Europe raising funds to help the American Revolutionary War. So maybe that's where he ran into Thomas Paine, because they sound like they had
similar.
Similar.
Yeah, I mean, the Thomas Paine, then he actually went back to France at one point. So the idea that most of us have in our heads is that someone came from England to America, that's where they stayed. Well, they didn't. Even in those days, they would then come back again. And then he actually went back from France and went back to America. So, the thought of that journey across the Atlantic, surely if you've done it once
that would
on
be
a
enough.
sailboat, you wouldn't really want to do it back again and then back again, would
Well,
you?
but he was basically almost kicked out of the country because he really wanted to separate the church and the state, basically, and was not into, every freedom of religion is part of who he was, and then you've got James Monroe, who's like, no, we're going to try and get him back. James Monroe likes him, but then at the same time, he went after George Washington. He was like, he trashed George Washington and sent him a nasty letter.
Did he pick his right fights? That's the thing. I mean, if you think about it, the people who he mixed with is pretty amazing when you think where he came from. His dad was just a staymaker in Thetford.
What's a staymaker, by the way?
Well, it can be someone who works in corsetry.
So it really was.
It can also be somebody who works with sails, because sometimes sails needed to have different supports on them. But they sort of think that his father was more of a corsetry person, who were making ladies' undergarments.
Well, maybe that's why he got in. He had a lot of women around.
That's how he met Benjamin Franklin.
Well, Benjamin Franklin had a lot of lady friends, but Benjamin Franklin was like the socialite of all of them. He really was the socialite, and he knew everybody. He was like, if you think about the first person who knew how to network in this country, I'm going to say Benjamin Franklin,
Right.
but I love that connection between the two of them. But we have to say that Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, and
Yeah.
we need some damn common
Oh,
sense.
don't we
Well,
all?
boy,
Don't the whole world need it at the moment?
exactly. What happened? I don't
It
know.
must have been lost somewhere.
I know. It's like we need to start over or something.
It's just unbelievable. I mean,
Oh.
it's some of the things that he did write were way before his time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They really were. But
Mhm.
again, if you're not saying what the people in charge want you to say, you're going to fall out with the people in
Mhm.
charge, aren't you?
Mhm.
And I think that's what sometimes you're the flavor of the month, and then the next month you're not the flavor of the month.
Right.
Right.
It can all come crashing down around your ears, I'm afraid.
Mhm.
Well, he was put in prison in Luxembourg, and he was put in the prison there, and that's how James Monroe got involved and said, "I want him back out." So he released him.
Mm.
But so he's got all this. I mean, it's a fascinating story about him. But I saw a photo of, I think it was on Wikipedia about him in England, because I thought it was going to be here in this country. He did something in Lewes, Lewes, and
Lewes,
we have a
yeah.
friend who lives out there, and he says it's Lewes out here
Right.
in Maryland, which we
Right.
were right next to, and we've just, when we were
Yeah.
in Maryland a couple years ago, we had no idea, like, oh yeah, Micah's just around the corner.
Yeah.
But Lewes, Maryland, oh my gosh, is it Maryland or Delaware now? Uh-oh, I better look it up. It's Maryland. It's Maryland. No, it's not. It's I don't know, but I'm thinking this goes back. Is this part? Where is it in England? I don't know what his connection is with Lewes
Yeah,
in England.
that's where his second wife lived.
Mm.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's where he had the shop, and that's where he also worked as an excise man in Lewes or Lewis or however you pronounce it as well. And
Okay,
that's where he sort of left to go to London and then America.
so is that far from you? Is it close to Norfolk?
That's in Kent, so I suppose that's, I don't know, 3 hours, 3.5 hours away. So I mean, it's not far, but they've actually got quite a lot of interest in Thomas Paine in that town as well, because the shop where he lived with his wife is still standing, I believe. So
Oh,
wow.
that's also got a lot of interest for Thomas Paine, because that's where he spent a lot of his, well, some of his adult life anyway.
It's Lewis, Delaware. We
Mm.
were in Easton, Maryland. Remember we did the interview with the owner of Eric from Levinson from the Hummingbird Inn in Easton?
Right.
That's
Yes,
where
I
we
do.
were. That's
All
where
right.
we were. And Lewis is just around the corner, but in Delaware.
Uh-huh.
There you go. I'll get my
Mhm.
geography straight. Sometimes we go round and round in circles as we drive across the country
Well,
That's
and
true.
have no clue where we are.
and
This is true.
you must also come to the same names
Mhm.
of towns. You must have lots of towns called the same name in America.
Yeah, there are a lot of
Mhm.
streets are the same. And I just want to know, why are people so boring with their street names?
Yeah.
Well,
Who cares if it's a 16.5 street? It's either 16 or 17. Or how about a name? How about Cherry Blossom
there-
Avenue?
there are towns we've been there where there'd be one First Street, 1.5 street,
Or
One
and then
in-
First Street and then
yeah,
First
1
Avenue.
3/4 street,
Yeah,
and then
see, that's-
two.
No.
No, it's, and I believe somebody told us that was when was it the Amish or the Mormons?
The Mormon settlers.
Yeah,
took
settlers
over.
named everything that way.
It
So
actually had to go with lots of land, how much
One
your
was-
acres were.
yeah, so it was like 1.5, 2.5,
And a
3,
quarter.
3.5,
Yeah.
1.25. It's like, it's crazy. The
But it's
names.
interesting because it goes back to just like the pieces of land. So it always ties back to history in some
Mhm.
manner,
Yeah.
So it's we have a lot of, presidential names, Martin Luther King Boulevard in just about every town, which
Every
is
town
great.
has one of those.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of that, but there's a lot of names, a lot of English names too, of names of towns. And that's what I was thinking, Lewis. I'm like, oh, there's another one that's connected back to England,
Mm.
Yeah. Have you
So
got any Thetfords? Have you been to Thetford in America?
no,
or
but
not?
I'm going to look it up now.
Yeah.
Mhm. Write it down.
Right.
I'm gonna
I know
find
we're going to have
out.
to look it up, but it's really fascinating, this how he bopped around. Thomas Paine,
He did.
England,
Mm.
France, America, and it just like you were saying, going on those ships is not fun. And
No.
didn't he have typhoid or no? What did he
Yes,
have when he
typhus.
typhus?
Yeah, I mean, everybody had some diseases of some sort or another.
Well,
Okay.
at least it wasn't
Yeah.
COVID.
Well, and you got him on the boat.
Yeah, you
Mhm.
would have. I mean, look what they had to eat and drink,
Yeah.
and
Ew.
the conditions they were living in as well.
Mhm.
They were rather close quarters, weren't they? So they never
Mhm.
had fun. They didn't have an ensuite bathroom every time.
Exactly. So I mean, you're all crunched together, and
Ew.
I don't know why somebody would go back and forth on ships back then if you didn't have to.
No, but the
Mm.
thing that really
Yeah.
strikes me about poor old Thomas Paine is that he's actually still been running around the world even since he's been dead, and that upsets me.
Okay,
I
yeah. Let's talk about that because
Yes.
really, I
Yeah.
feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
At least when you die, at least please let your bones rest.
Yeah.
And poor old Thomas was dug up.
That's terrible.
It's just not nice, is it?
No. Poor
well,
guy.
so somebody wanted to bring him back to England. So they
Yeah.
pulled
Yeah,
him out of his resting place.
Yeah, there was a bloke called Cobbett
Mm.
who decided that he would dig him up and bring him back to England and bury him in England somewhere and have a massive memorial for him. So he dug him up, and then I suppose he got fed up, and when he died, these box of bones were found in his attic, and then someone bought the skull and someone bought the leg
Oh.
bone, so by this would let me think, it's about 1819, I think, when Cobbett dug him up. And then by 1846, they were still discussing about where his bones might be. And even in 1937, I was still reading an article in a newspaper that they still weren't certain where bits were. They thought his head was in Australia,
Oh
or his
my
skull
gosh.
was in Australia. They think his brain stem is in the Thomas Paine Museum in the town where he lived in America, where his house is.
Oh.
And they've got some hair, and then there's bones, strewn all over the place. And
Wow.
what they want to do, or what they wanted to do, the last article I read, was they wanted to get the DNA from his hair sample from the museum in America
Oh.
and compare it to the skull that's in Australia to see if that's actually the right one. But for pity's sake, let him rest.
Geez, poor guy.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just
Wow.
weird. It's like everybody got around and started pulling at the skeleton.
Yeah.
It's just that
Isn't
visual that
that-
goes to my head.
That's really bizarre. And
That's
isn't it
bad
against?
juju. You shouldn't be
is.
doing that. That's bad
That's a-
juju on the people who did it. You know what I mean?
Isn't- So that man he's a grave robber. I mean, it's against the
Yeah.
law.
But
Isn't
I mean, he'd raised quite a lot of money to do that, and he had all the agreements of
Oh.
a load of people in England. But I think he went and done it in the middle of the night.
See, but I'm just going to say this. I think that he did not read common sense, obviously.
No, I mean, I think he went and done it in the middle of the night somewhere, and then he bought whatever he found back to England. And it's just an awful story. And
Oh
what
my
is even
gosh.
more awful is that we still don't know where he is. It's a bit like Charlie Chaplin. I think his body was stolen, wasn't it?
Oh gosh.
Well, they did this to Billy the Kid. So when
Yeah.
we went to Billy the Kid's
Mhm.
gravesite
They took his
in
grave.
New Mexico, it is under this cage. And he's buried with the I think there's two people, part of his gang, that were in the shootout. And he's buried where the shootout pretty much happened, in that area in New Mexico.
Yeah.
And they said
Mm.
this is like the fourth time they've had to bring his remains home. Like something like that. I have to go look, and don't quote me on the exact numbers, but
I
they
mean,
kept stealing him,
That's ridiculous.
because
I mean, if you want a ghost to come visit you, I guess go rob a gay grave. It's
Yeah.
like asking for a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but
It's-
why?
I
Why?
don't know. I don't
Mm.
know. Maybe they give them to their dogs.
No, they want. I mean,
Nancy.
originally in 1819, Mr. Cobbett wanted to bury him and have a big memorial in England
Yeah.
because the Americans didn't want to do that. The Americans just wanted basically to chuck him in a hole.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
Oopsie.
at the end of the day, I would rather be chucked in a hole and left there rather than be
Scattered.
dug up and
Scattered.
all over the
Broken and
world.
broken apart. Okay, so
Yeah.
there's a story from when we were in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I'll have to look up on the archives of our podcast where it was
Mhm.
during the Revolutionary War and somebody was killed, and then they needed to bring the body down to another state for some reason, and the body was too big, so they melted him.
Ew.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to look this one up again and get it
Yeah.
straight, but they melted him. And I think
Mhm.
like once the skull and the something like that, because it was one person on horseback. And so that's what they melted him or something like that.
Well, if you really want to talk about awful stories, Horatio Nelson, when he was killed in the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, obviously he was one of England's biggest heroes, and he was going to be buried in London. They were going to bring his body back. And as you know, the English sailors always had barrels and barrels of rum. So they preserved Nelson's body in a barrel of rum so that was preserved. And then when they got to England, they obviously took, you know what I'm going to say. They took his body out of the barrel, and yes, they wouldn't waste the rum, would they?
I'm gonna say don't light a match next to his body.
Well, he said he was probably quite happy. It's better than being
That's
scattered all
truly
over the
being
place.
pickled. That's being
Oh, yeah.
pickled.
Yeah, but
Total-
they drank the rum as well. They didn't want to
Oh,
waste
that
the rum.
is so gross.
Ew, because things come out your body when you die. I mean,
Stop it. Stop it.
So death is another subject. It's a very big subject, death.
yeah,
how
we should
how
do
we
a show on that.
How we treated people when they died, and even not
Now.
being gory, but what we do now is not natural, is it?
Well, one of
No.
the states out here, just made it legal to kill people by firing squad
Yeah,
instead of a needle. I can't remember what state it was, but it was some state just made it legal to, prisoners on death row, that instead of using the injection, apparently it is painful, and I don't know. You used to be we'd hanged people, we've electrocuted people, and the
Poisoned them?
execution style is like, I thought
Well,
that was a
what
pretty
if-
old way
no,
of
but
killing people.
the gas chamber where they just put
Gas
gas
chamber.
in. I mean,
That's a Hitler
that's
thing.
kind of gross.
Well,
Yeah.
this has just gone really nice. Happy
But
spring,
we don't
everybody.
do that.
In-
We've not got the death penalty here at all.
Now, see, well, I don't know. I guess we're still cowboys out here.
We got a little bit on and
On-
off. It depends
in-
on what state.
In some of the older cemeteries out here, you'll find all the headstones are pointing the same direction unless the person being buried was an outlaw, in which case the grave is swapped around.
Mm.
And that's interesting. Do
Well,
you have
that
that?
was in South Africa. That was South
No,
Africa.
I mean in England, it just depends which way they put the stone up.
Okay, we're going to have to do a whole show on this.
Let's do it
Over
for
Halloween.
Halloween.
We'll do it a bonfire. Well,
Halloween.
listen, isn't bonfire night part of it? You used to throw people. I mean, we used to burn people like that.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. We were very civilized. We burned people.
People, yes. Well, mostly women, witches.
Well, this in England, I
Yeah.
remember seeing you put your head in and they just guillotine you off
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
your head. And
The
then there was the
pillow- yeah.
dunking. They used to
Yeah,
dunk the
with
nags and
dunking,
the women. They
Yeah.
would just, if you nagged, they'd put you in the little thing and dunk you in the cold river.
Yep. And
Well, we should-
if you-
Maybe that's
if
why
you-
Thomas Paine said that's enough of that, of how we treat women.
Probably. I mean, the thing is, with the Duncan stool, if you floated, you were a witch, so you were killed. if you sank and drowned, you were innocent.
And then they go, oh, sorry about that.
What the heck? Are you kidding me?
Oh,
No, I'm not
oops.
kidding you. No.
No,
Oh my
isn't that
gosh.
crazy? So you
That's-
really, you want to die, but you don't. So, I mean, that's just nuts.
this is, but then if you think
Mm.
about Thomas Paine, okay, so everybody that goes over to the States from England are, here we have the English versus the new America. It was this chance for the country to say, we don't want to live. I mean, because you even said, talking about the Mayflower, we didn't want the same religion things from England, right? We wanted
Yeah.
our own religion. So he was pretty much about freedom of religion and having women's rights, and I think people's rights too.
Yeah, I think
Seems like
getting back to Thomas Paine.
now that we've burned everybody and dunked them.
Yeah, but getting back to that, I mean, when you think about it, founding a new country with a completely new set of rules
Mm.
was a fantastic opportunity, wasn't it?
Mhm.
And now look what you've done to it.
I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
Oh, I'm so tempted to say so-and-so did it, but I better not.
Okay, yeah, we're all gonna
please don't.
behave now. Oh my gosh.
No,
Oh,
in all seriousness, though, you know, there was the fantastic opportunity to get the best of everything and to
Mhm.
make a really, really
Mhm.
fantastic job of it. And I think a lot of it was what Thomas Paine was trying to do.
Mhm.
And yeah, okay, so he didn't do it all the right way, but I think, yeah, he did have a lot of stuff for the rights of man, you know, a little bit of common sense. He was thinking about women's rights. You know, he had a lot of really,
Good
really
ideas.
fantastic things that he was
Mm.
thinking about. And it's just that, you know, people didn't do it.
I think someone has to do a movie on him and include how,
It
you
would
know,
be interesting.
then maybe
Mm.
there is one. I'm gonna go look it up now. I'm fascinated by him now. I'm glad we
Yeah.
had this chat. So we now know we're gonna talk about English, American English versus British English. That's
Yeah,
gonna be the
good.
next. And then everyone stay tuned for October because we'll be talking about death.
Well, yeah, witches and cemeteries
Exactly.
good.
in both countries. We'll do
Absolutely.
witches and all that
Yeah.
kind of weird stuff.
Everyone, again, you can keep up with Glynn. Go to norfolk-tours.co.uk, and you can hear Glynn here on Big Blend Radio every fourth Saturday. So keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. And you can also see his article on Thomas Paine. Just go to blendradioandtv.com. Thanks so much, Glynn. It's always
Thanks,
fun.
Glynn.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's a lovely,
Thanks.
lovely chat today.